our politics always has played to the lowest common denominator. And amazingly, the disconnect between elected representatives, I call them chosen representatives, not elected, they're chosen representatives. And I'm sure we'll touch a little bit more on that later. Mm-hmm. The disconnect is palpable, right? Because these are people in the highest office of the land that genuinely believe that they're anointed and they deserve to be there and that they're the most fit, even though virtually none of them have any track record of success. So it's an astonishing disconnect. So when you ask the answer of where we're heading, I think that quick summary really answers the question for those three, and you could make the determination yourself as far as where we are and where we're going.
So I do understand now why it says a break was necessary, because I can read that the frustrations are there indeed. And it's not yourself who shares such. In fact, to a great extent, one would argue that there's a sense of malaise within our society, and we're lethargic in even our way of thinking. Forget acting for a moment, even our way of thinking. But that being said, I want to get to that point of which you made. To what extent do you think these chosen representatives, and maybe you could expand on what you mean by chosen representatives, are part of the bigger problem?
Well, absolutely. And I said, I'm not going to spend any time assailing the politicians in the country or the decisions that this government or the one in the past or the one before that has made. I mean, that really it accomplishes nothing. But when I say chosen representatives, right, we live in a constitutional tyranny, right? And people have to understand where I'm coming from with that. Are we free to come and go as we please? For the most part, yes. Are we free to say what we want? Not really, because of the system and the immense concentration of power that's given in this system, you aren't really free to say what you want to say, because if you do, there are significant consequences for it. But when I say constitutional tyranny, what most Trinidadians don't understand, and quite frankly, I didn't know myself until about 5 or 6 years ago, is the constitution that governs Trinidad and Tobago today is the Republican Constitution of 1976, which was passed during a no-vote campaign where there was no opposition, right? And that constitution governs us today. The Prime Minister, whether this one or the previous one or the previous one, essentially, and the leaders of both parties, select who will be the member of the House of Representatives for that party. There's a screening committee, as you know, and that person goes to the screening committee, and the party panelists decide if that person can or can't or does or doesn't qualify to be that member of parliament. After the election, the winner of this sweepstakes, as I call it, then chooses every member of the upper house. So you have the upper house and the lower house both selected by the political leadership. Then the independent Senate is chosen by the president, who is chosen by a parliamentary majority. And then, of course, every single state board chairman, every RHA chairman, commissioners of police, every person of influence is then handpicked by the Prime Minister or the winner of the election. So when you ask me to look at the situation and say, do we have elected representatives? The answer, yes, they go to an election and they are chosen in an election process. But those people are chosen by the parties. So what ends up happening is you essentially vote for a flag. What we have now is obviously red or yellow. You have a flag, and that's the option, that's the extent of what your consent is. So my consent has been diluted down to voting for a flag, right? So constituency representatives in the House of Representatives, both upper and lower house, are not chosen, are not elected by the people. They're chosen by the political leadership. So when you consider the concentration of power, right, what we have are essentially emperors and empresses is what we have. That system can't work. And until once that system remains the dominant system in Trinidad and Tobago, we will continue to simply be like hamsters running over a wheel.
So then, that being said, in terms of the constitutional reform exercise that is taking place, because they are heading across to Tobago, but what are your thoughts, what are your recommendations in respect to constitutional reform here in TNT, particularly noting that you've just spoken about the structures of government and how governance, the role of government and how governance is here in TNT?
Well, I mean, I'm still a believer that the federalist system in the U.S. is the greatest system ever forged by pen, right? Both the upper and lower house are chosen by the representatives and the constituents of each constituency, right? Whether it's a borough or it's an area like in the U.S. Then the prime minister or the president is given free rein, free authority to pick whomever he or she pleases to serve in cabinet, right? With the very clear understanding that those cabinet members, what was known to us as ministers, right, answer to the House of Representatives. So whilst they may have all the glory of going to big meetings and making, essentially directing policy, if they are called to a hearing of a Senate or a congressional subcommittee on the Hill at 9 o'clock in the morning, they are summoned and it takes absolute precedence. So what has ended up happening with that, and again, that system has its own flaws because of man. I mean, the biggest failure point in history has been man, right? When wars happen, it's because two men or women could not negotiate at a negotiating table. It collapses and you go to war. So the biggest failure point in history has been man, whether it's through hubris, through wanton greed, whatever the case may have been. But you put the power into the hands of people, right? What we have here is the exact opposite of that, right? So one of the first things that I think should be on the constitutional card is essentially, and it sounds perhaps unreachable, is a term in geography called comprehensive redevelopment. Essentially, scrap and rebuild. We have to look at our constitution. We have to put together a panel of individuals, and perhaps they've done that. I have gotten calls from some of the panelists for contributions and so on, but my contribution may be a bit too radical. But it's scrap and rebuild. Mm-hmm. We need to understand where we are as a country today, which is different to what we were in 1976, right? Our constitution is voluminous. If you look at the French constitution, this is it. It's a leaflet, right? The American constitution is probably 15 or 16 pages, right, long. Our constitution is a voluminous book that speaks about religion. I mean, it's mind-boggling to consider the level of perceived control in the constitution. So we need to have truly objective individuals from all sectors, mm-hmm. civic, business, the clergy, and so on, and put together a document that is fitting for a country that is no longer leaving the port as we were in 1976. You know, one maximum leader, one person's hand on the wheel. This country is far too diverse now, not just ethnically diverse. We are mentally diverse. We think differently, and we need a document, right, that protects, because remember, that's what a constitution is. A constitution is a document that protects people from too much government, mm-hmm. right? Ours has done the exact opposite. So I don't know if that committee or that panel is, we run the country by committee. Every time something happens, you placate the population with a committee. I mean, it's become comical. So I don't know if this committee will have the gumption to make the suggestions that need to happen. And even if they had the gumption to make those suggestions, I'm not entirely certain that the political directorate will have the will to embark on them. But we need real meaningful reform, not just watchwords for election campaigning. Mm-hmm. Our constitution is not fitting to the country where we are now, and it needs to start with the entire electoral reform, because if we continue to have these chosen representatives, we will never have representation, because when our elected reps go, they put the party first. And no system can work where you put party before people. So if they have that type of gumption and they really have the type of conversation that's necessary, and there are dissenting opinions within that committee, but if it's a homogeneous group of the same types of people, you're going to get the same results, which is what I think we've seen from all of the committees of the last, from the ferry to all of them, all the committees, it's going to be the same thing. So, you know, I wish them luck, but you need to have some, you know, some really aggressive individuals in there that can put aside the political dispensations and essentially put the country first, which is a term I've used before.
Which
is,
and this is the thing,
first.
you have used that term before, you have adopted an attitude of I take responsibility for my country. But just before I get into that, previously you have suggested that mismanagement, corruption, delinquency are the core of issues that are plaguing Trinidad and Tobago. You even said that our nation, which was once rich in human resource, is becoming increasingly fragile and social recession is taking place. But in your response just now, you said perhaps your thoughts, your recommendations are too radical. Isn't radical, one could argue, necessary at this point, given our direction since independence?
No, absolutely. And I am a radical. And, you know, people tend to think that radicals are, you know, just, structural destroyers. No, quite the opposite. Radicals just believe things need to constantly change, right? You know, and you're always looking at the environment around you and trying to find ways to make it better, right? And you find most good business people are, because you're continuously looking for that, you know, that improvement, that avenue to get whether it's more competent, your business to be stronger. So I think radical is a term that has kind of been misused, right? But I don't think it's perhaps mismanagement and corruption and so on has impeded our growth. I think in fact it has. Right, and the most important asset in a country, there's no question about it, is its people. Not the oil in the ground or the minerals in the ground, right? Those things will simply contribute to the wealth, and then what gets done with it is the most important thing. So, right, and we have single-handedly in the last 40, 50, 60 years, through distorted policies and poor decision-making, destroyed and decimated our human resource of people, right? So whether through migration now or lack of repatriation, I mean, the conversation at all levels. I mean, I have staff at all levels who have left and gone to family, been summoned to family in Toronto and New York, and they've left the country, right? So whether by it's being atrophied, whether by migration or lack of repatriation, certainly at the higher levels, society, you hear kids who are going away and they're studying and they're just not coming back to Trinidad. So we have not even tried or had the discussion of how to arrest that. The conversation is not even there, right? So we have decimated our human resource, you know, why would people come back right now? And I think the media has a role to play as well, but the media simply is reporting what's there. I mean, you have on the corner of some of the newspapers, on the top corner, the murder meter, similar to what we had during COVID, the COVID death meter, right? But you know. So you look at Trinidad and there's this gloom and doom every day. You almost feel like you are, you know, there's a dark cloud that hangs over the country and follows us every single day. So that inspiration, people to come back to Trinidad, is not there. But the bigger issue for us, you know, again, is a discussion that's not being had. Is not about the degradation, but also our relevance as a country. Our relevance as a country in the region is fading. And once I mean, 10 years ago we were the, you know, the big brother, that figure where all leaders, you know, they came to us and our opinion was sought, and right, that clearly has been badly atrophied. And I just mean by this government over the course of the last 10, 20 years, that has been badly atrophied. You see the leaders of Jamaica and Barbados, and certainly Guyana now. I mean, Irfan Ali's just won a massive award in Africa. Mia Motley is a star, obviously, on the global stage. So you're seeing our relevance as a country beginning to really to fall apart. So we've been really static, right? There is no, as was put in a movie once, we are like nomads running through the desert, and when we get to a mirage, we drink the sand, right? That's how desperate that we've become. So I think we have a lot of issues that we need to shoulder, but one of them really is, again, not just because of our human resource atrophy, but our relevance is also fading in Trinidad, and we're no longer, we're no longer the powerhouse that we used to be, and I think it's something we need to seriously reflect on. I think a big part of it is the really distorted and poor policies that have been coming out of the corridors of power, going on several years now.
And let me shift now, actually, to the point that you just made. What is your opinion on our current political offerings? Previously, you have publicly supported Gary Griffith and the National Transformation Alliance. Does that support still stand, or whom do you think is best to lead Trinidad and Tobago? Next year is an election year, 2025, a massive year for Trinidad and Tobago. What are your thoughts on the current political offerings?
Well, it's funny. It's a massive year. I mean, every election should be a big year for a country, right? Because, like I said, an individual's consent is such an important thing, right? So when your consent is given the value of a box of food and a T-shirt for 35 days every 5 years, as we have seen, and then the very next day, right, you put yourself in a position where you have water kicked on you by your constituents, right? It goes to show the disrespect or the disdain for that consent. People need to understand, right? That's the one time, and I think that's what happened in the election of 2017 in the U.S., when a lot of the pundits were saying this is the one time that billionaire, truck driver, casual garden worker, they have one vote. Everyone becomes equal, right? And that's the beauty of an election, right? From that perspective. But I think our consent in Trinidad really has been diluted down to which car has a bigger megaphone on top of the roof, who paints the party's slogan on the street, right? Even the campaigning is an obscenity of super money, right? So that there are no issues being discussed, right? So that for one part is sickening. So as far as the political offering, I mean, I still support the former commissioner, right? And as I told him as well, I don't want to trade one emperor for another, right? And that's essentially what has happened, because the parties talk about what they're going to do in the same almost superficial way, but if the system is not changed, I'm trading one dictator for another. That's not what or one autocrat for another. That's not what I want, right? But given the climate that we are in, and I've said this publicly before, right? He has a track record of success. He has a track record of service that goes back almost 2.5 decades, right? I genuinely believe he loves this country. And I believe when he speaks the truth, right? Is he flawed? We all are. We all are, right? But these are qualities of good leaders. And his term as Commissioner of Police, right, was without question for my 30 years. And now you don't have a great benchmark, right? But Gary's term as Commissioner of Police, from my perspective, was the most effective display of public service that I've seen in Trinidad, right? So my support continues to be there. Now, that can change as anything else, right? Because my consent is important to me. And I've said before, political parties are not football teams, right? Every 4 years in the World Cup, I wear my sombrero, right? And I go and I support Mexico. Every 4 years. That's my team, right? And obviously that can change, but that's my team. Because when I was young, whatever the reason is, and that's my team, right? Political parties aren't football teams. You are supposed to be politically itinerant. and find the organization. So you can be PNM for 5 years and switch to UNC, and you can switch back to PNM. All that is fine, right? But my consent is important to me. So that can change, right? But the time has come for people to vote their own personal convictions and to understand what they believe their vision for the country to be, and seek that out and demand that and accept nothing less than that from the people who are chosen to represent them. So 2025 is a big year. I think the electorate has changed significantly. I think you're going to have in this election a lot of people who are getting into voting age who don't know the histories, who are not bound. I think you're seeing some of the older, more entrenched electorate base moving out of the voting process, and a lot of the newer people, younger people, more radical, more proactive, right, that expect something different from their politics, moving in to the voting electorate. I think that's going to be important to understand that. And those younger people want something a bit different. You don't necessarily have to have the typical political, style of shaking hands and touching people. There's probably 100,000 voters now.
Let me interject you there for a moment, Mr. Peter George Jr. And this is actually also my final question to you. It ties in so well. Given all that you've said this morning, I mean, you show the cap early on, country first. You've adopted the attitude of, I take responsibility for my country. You've also said that we should put country first, take responsibility in moving away from the doom and gloom for a brighter future through an integrated strategy for development. I see you put the cap on. That being said, have you ever considered playing a more active role politically, offering yourself to serve in office here in Trinidad and Tobago? Have you ever considered that? Are you considering that as we speak?
I mean, listen, some people are built for this, and some people aren't. I think it's important, and most people don't know that the 8 years of American presidency stems from, in the Federalist Papers, or I can't remember, one of the documents, that you must devote 8 years of your life to public service, right? It was a requirement, it was a mantra. Right. So I still think that's important. I think people cannot just simply be myopic and self-serving. So, but the retail, the climate of the retail politics in Trinidad is a very challenging one. So, I mean, you can ask yourself, I'll ask you the question very simply. Can someone like me, be chosen by one of the parties? Very hard, because someone like myself is not going to go in there with, like I said before, homogenized thought. So if the system was one where the decision was made by the electorate, it may be something that more people like myself would consider. But going into the system now means that you essentially are succumbing to this diseased and sordid system that does not work. The system is designed for failure. So is it something, listen, it certainly would not be for me, and there are many, many, many thousands like me. It'll not be for the flashes of camera or for the bus route pass, right, or for the big office space that you may get. It'll be if we believe that we are in a position to effect meaningful change, right, to go in there and have the political leadership, right, whether we assume the leadership or we're part of the leadership, are going to listen. But so from that perspective, the answer is yes. The answer is yes for anybody who believes that they can contribute to making their country. And you're seeing it happening in parts of our region. You're seeing it happening in El Salvador. Incredible what's happening in El Salvador with Nayib Bukele. So the short answer is yes, but the long answer is, am I seeking any type of political office? No, the answer is no. The answer is categorically no. But like I said, I've been quiet for quite some time. My last interview was with Fazir Mohammed on his last week, when he interviewed some of his old sparring partners. But you have to believe that if the words of people like myself make no difference, do we think getting in there and influencing them from the inside makes a difference? Perhaps. But like I said, I think what we do now, what many of us do and have done, is yeoman service. And we almost get hit by a brick wall. So that's why the retail political environment is a difficult one. And if that were to change, then, and the system were to change, and people with different opinions were really embraced as opposed to stood down, you may see more. And I think it needs to happen, because all we're doing now is recycling the same thing over and over. You come in, you sign up to this, this club, right? You're under the whip of the government, and that's it. But you get some flashing lights, you get a big office, and you get a priority bus route pass, right? And perhaps that's enough. But if I was to go in there in any capacity in public service, it would be to make a meaningful change. So the decision will be, if I believe that I can accomplish that, sure. I love my country. I mean, we're here, and we toil the fields every day in this country, and it's not an easy one. It's a difficult one, because, like I said, the system, from public administration to basic utilities to essential services, nothing functions well, and it's difficult. And the quick question is, are we better off than we were 20, 30 years ago? And the short answer is no. If I can play a role, or any of us can play a role in changing that, I think we have to take it.
Indeed. Well, there's so much more that I can ask you, Mr. George Jr., after such a long time, but we'll end it there. Thank you so much for your presence and for your time. Appreciate it. And need I say, there is hopefully a lot more content, a lot more conversation to come from yourself, your contributions, that is, of course, to AM Prime. So thank you so much, sir, and I look forward to the next.
Okay, Keith, thank you, and thank you to everybody. Morning.
All the very best. Take care. An individual who has adopted the attitude of, I take responsibility for my country. You saw him wearing his hat, country first. And as I said, after so long, having his presence to share some commentary certainly was very much appreciated on the part of Mr. Peter George Jr. this morning. So thank you very much to him indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, how many of you can relate to what Mr. George Jr. stated? From conversations with members of the public and individuals who reach out to us here at WESN, certainly he speaks for many. We take a break here on AM Prime. We'll return shortly.
Imagine a world where arguments don't exist. CICR is a full-service conflict resolution company that offers mediation training and workshops for all. In 2024, our 40-hour workshops are back, giving you all the tools you need to become a certified mediator in Trinidad and Tobago. Want to know more? Call us at 768-6778 or visit our website. Let's work together to make the world a better place.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm not to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No.
Let's go to the last part.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
It is now you don't need to register nothing. You don't need. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a
great idea and, you know, I have a great concept. But until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Coming soon to WESN.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really
respond to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why.
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. So we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year. Early this year.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren. Coming soon to WESN.
From one constructive conversation to another. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome back. I gave him a bit of a break this morning, so I welcome back to the program Chris Hussain. Hello, Chris.
Hello, how are you?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Again, it's a Friday morning.
A Friday morning.
A Friday. Yeah.
And actually, you just had the opportunity to absorb some of the
really necessary conversation. And what stood out to me was Mr. George spoke to elections always being interested, and what he also spoke about was the new generation that is going to have a say in the election and what we expect to hear on the political hustings. And I think for the past maybe 4 Fridays, that has been something that you would have noticed, at least from our generation. We want something more and different. So I want to agree with Mr. George in that we need something new. We need real policies, real politics to discuss.
I'm going to get back to you on that in a moment, but I'd also like to welcome a gentleman who is very much familiar to the program, Ajay Aline, and he's out in Tobago. Good morning, Ajay.
Good morning, Keaton. Good morning, Chris. It's a pleasure to be back with you guys.
Thanks very much for joining us. So let me get straight into the conversation, and we're tying into what Chris just mentioned. He said, and you have been seeing it for quite some time, that young people in TNT want something new. They want something refreshing. But define new. And I say define new in the sense that you've got new political parties with old faces, and then you've got old political parties with new faces. Define new.
I'm happy that I'm given the opportunity to define new. And new is very simple. You ask the question, and I'm going to give a very simple answer, and my answer is having a productive conversation about building Trinidad and Tobago. And I think for the past decade, that has been missing. Imagine in politics and TNT that a productive conversation in taking the country forward has been very absent. I mean, take for example what is happening right now. We're seeing politicizing of health issues in this country, where it is going to, and I predict it's going to be used as a political football to score political points. And, and I want to even take us back to when the country cried out. We wanted our leaders to have a conversation about crime talks, and they could not sit down, they could not put their ego aside to have productive conversations in the interests of Trinbagonians in this country. And there are politicians who exhibit the new productive qualities which we wish to see. And I'll give you an example of 2 persons right now. The Member of Parliament for Tabaquite and the Member of Parliament for Tobago East. And I'll give you another example, and I'll dive into that. In the budget, I believe it was the Standing Finance Committee, there would have, so the opposition MPs, they probed the line minister. And in conversation, the member for Tobago East, who is the minister in the office of the Prime Minister responsible for gender affairs, there was a crosstalk happening between her and member for Tabaquite, Anita Haynes-Allen. And they came to the conclusion, you know what, we need to have a bipartisan meeting. How can I extend the olive branch to help a rural community like Tabaquite access the initiatives that's under the ministry? And how else can we formulate our policies to target that group which you represent? And that's the kind of productive discourse that we wish to see. And that's just a simple example. Now, what it comes down to is if the political, I would say, leadership in the mainstream parties, the major parties, are really going to allow these younger, newer persons to take the reins of power in the party and be able to take the party forward in a more futuristic way, having more productive conversations. And I'll just sum it there.
Let me bring Ajay into this. You've used a very powerful, look at me using the word powerful. I'm going to say what you just said, power. It's a term that can be very positive, but it's something that could also be toxic. And that's why I bring Ajay into the conversation. Not because he's toxic. I didn't mean it because of that. I want his viewpoint, actually. Ajay, good morning to you once more, my friend. Welcome back to AM Prime. But given what Chris just said, you can have something new, but what we've seen here in TNT is that the first taste of power seems to overtake the ambition, seems to really consume an individual who is entering the political systems for the very first time. And that just ruins it all. And time we've seen it again. So even though you have individuals who are new, it's just the same old practices and the same old attitudes. How do we overcome this?
Yes, for me, I believe, firstly, is because we have practiced flawed governance system. We have politicians who are supposed to be policy makers who become self-servant. I think it's just because we have practiced the wrong thing for so long that it has become normal, and we have to be prepared. I'm not using a phrase a lot of persons may not like, but we have to change it and be accustomed to the new normal. Create an avenue where politicians stick to policy. You leave public servants to deal with the governance and the public servant side of things. You allow the process to take its course and stop trying to circumvent what is actually happening or what needs to be done. Because I'm of the view the younger generation of politicians, if given the room and the space, would do things different. But how would our elders receive this? Because in the elections, you need votes and you need numbers. And what percentage of the population who are between 18 to 35 that could actually go out and have a serious impact on how the election swings? Because the established organizations have a lot of loyal supporters. So it doesn't matter who the political organization sends, what's the philosophy, what's the policy, they would support it. However, with this new younger generation, I don't believe we would be party loyalists. We have a policy, we support this policy, we support this initiative. As soon as we believe you're beginning to stray, I suspect that this generation would flip-flop on you very, very often, and I think it will augur good for governance and for the country as a whole.
You really think so, Ajay? Because if it comes, for example, of job security, and this is something that governments have used time and time again as bait, if young people, through their voter participation with one political party or organization, are guaranteed an income for whatever that position may be, do you really think that they're not going to be loyal? Loyalty is stronger than morality here in TNT, you know, Ajay.
No, you see, I could understand where you're coming from because it has been the strategy of a particular political organization, which I would not name. But we also have to realize now we're living in the information age. And politicians should not be the distributor of jobs. There are certain jobs that, yes, you would leave and allow for them. But why can't we not leave the normal employment system to operate without the influence of politicians? When they begin to influence the job market, that is why we see a lack of productivity. That's why we see persons who get very complacent. It's simply because they didn't go through the correct process to earn the job in the first place, and they don't have an appreciation for the job. It affects productivity across the line. But it has been a tactic that has been used over the years, particularly in areas like CPEP and URP, which aren't sustainable jobs. You can't have an HDC house, pay a sufficient HDC rent, and a CPEP or a URP salary. I mean, let's be real. You cannot mine a child on a CPEP and a URP salary. So we need to think bigger than CPEP and URP and these make-work programs that we usually see. From politicians, we have a generation now that can Google it. We can go up on Facebook and see what's happening, see what's being said. We can do research and see what the job markets look like globally and see what these opportunities are.
Yeah, this morning's conversation with Peter George Jr., he mentioned government structures and how governance is here in TNC, and that's exactly what both of you all are now mentioning. So we know, we have an understanding of what the issues are. The problem is, and this is where it gets frustrating, individuals whom you think could contribute meaningfully to TNT. I know we get trapped in the political system and, you know, what color we wear, what shirt we wear. I'm this party till I die.
Well, I wanna just chime in on that before you ask the question, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Because Ajay is absolutely very correct when he speaks about party loyalty. And your first question would have been, what are we looking for? What is new? And I gave a simple answer, and I'll give another answer now. In that our generation, and I will be very specific, I'm specific in saying millennials, and I'm specific in saying Gen Z. And we are loyal to our country. Does that make sense? We are loyal to our country. And what we have seen in the past, or we have inherited a system, well, a two-party system in this country, and within that two-party system, what we have observed is that persons are loyal to their party for whatever reason. And some persons in this country, and it exists in both of the major political parties, that some persons find an identity within the political party. And that identity politics, or even personality politics, is something we need to shift away from. You see, I view political parties as a vehicle to get into government, but that vehicle must be attractive. And what is the pull factor to get persons to not just be members of your party, but to get buy-in, to vote? It must be something of substance. You must have a policy, you must have a position as it relates to the major things.
Okay, so then
crime,
let me interject you. Have you seen any examples of that currently being portrayed?
Unfortunately not. I mean, today, I think in the lower house, they're going to continue a private motion on the health sector. And I anticipate, this is 7 or 3 a.m. and I anticipate the debate is going to go down a very, very bad, dangerous place.
Well, look at the debate, the private motion brought by Senator Jansi Lashmidia Ramdial about, the government ensuring that democracy stays. Say what you want about the actual private motion, but that turned out to be disaster, what we saw happening there in Parliament. That turned out to really be disaster, and we're going to get into that in a moment, but I want to come back to the question I was asking about people put on this jersey and they think that they're this party till they die. I raise that point because what I'm hearing from both you and Angie this morning, obviously, is for a taste of something different, new perspective. I understand that. I respect that. So that being said, going back to my points about people who have the competency, people who have the understanding, people who are willing and wanting to work with TNT, never getting involved. Do you think that yourself, Ajay, other young people I've spoken to are willing to shift away from the political systems and the political organizations that exist and even create a new style or a new organization for yourselves?
But here's the thing. I have thought of that already, about third parties, what does a different system look like, constitutional reform, what the parliament could look like, executive president, and I've thought, and we have had discussions about that on several occasions, but the reality, Keaton, is that in Trinidad and Tobago, the way the system that we inherit, we have to accept it to a certain extent. We do have 2 major political parties. Now, I am not one to condemn both the UNC and the PNM and say, well, they're evil, they're no good, they're corrupted, they do... No. That will get us nowhere because we have to be productive as well. The PNM and the UNC, they have contributed to national development in this country and we can't take that away. But what we are speaking about...
They've also contributed to national detriment.
I agree. I agree with that. But what we're speaking about today is how do we shift the organizations and the political discourse forward. And I am saying to you and the Trinidad and Tobago that I do believe that there are younger persons capable of that within both political organizations. The question to me now is if they would be given the opportunity to shift the party's direction.
Okay, so that's where I bring Ajay. Yes, no, Ajay, go ahead. Let me hear your thoughts. Go ahead, Ajay.
I think one of the concerns I had prior to the last TG election is a concern I would have shared with a number of my friends. The question shouldn't be, are there persons willing to implement the change or to get it done? The question should be, as a population, are we ready to accept the change? Because change is not an easy process. Are we willing to accept the fact that things are going to be done differently and life as we know it or operations as we know it is not going to be the same for a while? Because we saw it here in the Tobago space. I mean, this current administration or dispensation did not do everything perfect. But we know that there was shake-up that was going to happen. And we saw where, quote-unquote, public servants began to push back simply because it was no longer life as we know it or proceedings as we know it, because systems were being changed and they were being changed for the good. So are we willing as a population to go through that year and a half transition? Are we willing? Because even in the process of change, everything is not going to be perfect. It's going to be painful that sometimes. Some people are going to be rubbed the wrong way. But are we willing as a country to sacrifice that period for the greater good.
Ajay, the very first time you came on this program, you said it yourself. The Tobago electorate is very much different to the Trinidad electorate. We are two islands, one nation, two attitudes. The people in Tobago, the electorate, as you said, they don't forget. You know, they don't forget at all. Here in TNT, here in Trinidad, to be more specific, it seems as though we have a 7-day memory. We tend to forget very, very easily. So the attitudes are very much different. And I will make the argument that people want change, but they're not willing to accept the cost of change or the repercussions of change, which is why the point that you just made about young people coming up within the parties. Okay, put it this way. Look at the United National Congress, and you've got Anita Haynes is your example. Jayanti Lakshmi could be another one. If you take a look at the People's National Movement, you use Diana Webster Roy as an example. There's Shamfa Kujo as well, whom I think Shamfa Kujo has matured so much since she entered office. Right? She has matured so much since she's entered office. That being said, though, these individuals have been stifled. I will be the one to say it if nobody else wants to say it. They've been stifled.
No, it's true.
Right? They have been stifled. Anita Haynes, when she came out, had a lot of support. Now, it just seems as though she's been stifled. We know this until. So, I will look at you and say, there's no hope for young people inside any of these parties.
So what are we going to sit down and do? Just say
that's what I'm asking you. That's what I'm asking you. If currently there is no hope for young people inside any of the two main parties that exist, and though new parties have been established, they haven't spoken as much to the young people here in TNT. The question I've asked you and Ajay, and nobody has given me a definitive answer yet, is whether or not you guys think it is more effective to have a party established by young people. Young people get old eventually, I know that. Established by young people, for the future of TNT. So,
Keith, I want to ask a question here.
Go ahead.
And I want to be very, very specific and probably controversial. You see, the way we collect data post or pre-elections is something we have to look into. Because I would like to now know, based on your question, what percentage of the actual vote are young people voters, are voters between the age of 18 to 35? Because let's take it from a practical standpoint. Between 35 and let's say 60, that will be majority of your voters. And I am tempted to believe, I'm not sure, I don't have the data to support this claim.
Neither do
but
I.
I'm tempted to believe that a lot of these older folks are going to be the larger part of the population with more numbers. And then they're going to become the populace and they're going to be more involved in it. Because I'm tempted to believe that young people don't participate in elections. They don't participate in politics. They see it as being a waste of time. Nobody care about me. Everybody checking for themselves, so me and business. I mean, it's not the right approach because political decisions affect everybody, whether we like it or not. And I mean, I'm a part of an initiative in Tobago now where we're trying to get young persons more involved in the system and not from a political standpoint. And the question now would be, is it wrong or would it work against these political organizations to have proper political educational programs implemented and run throughout Trinidad and Tobago?
I want to also take a bite at this question because I'm sitting and I'm thinking about both the political organizations and what they have offered in terms of youth representation. And when I say youth representation, I don't necessarily mean 18 and their 20s kind of youth. I think just means younger in politics. And I think there's a lot of let me put it this way, young people are used as tokens politically because I'm seeing within the UNC right now, there are some younger politicians who are practicing old politics. What do I mean by that? And as we all know, because we live in Trinidad and Tobago and not under a rock, there's that internal election sort of, I would say, discussion being had in the UNC. And I'm seeing a younger group of persons, younger politicians. They are driving a more productive conversation about upholding the highest ethics within the organization of the UNC, wanting to shift the direction, wanting to better the organization, wanting to better the policy position and that kind of thing. And it is being driven by persons like Rushton Parry, like persons like Rodney Charles, who is more mature.
Well, he was blatant in saying that older politicians have ruined it for young people.
Mrs. Anita Haynes Allen. And so when you see that kind of movement being had in any political organization where the status quo is being challenged, that is kind of attractive to young persons. Now, if that does not work, I have to now rely on the voter turnout of the last general election and the last local government election. And Keaton and Adri, the facts are there is a space for a viable third force in this country. There is a space. In numbers prove that there is a space for it. So I will not be surprised. I will not be surprised. Listen, and the other thing is, even in the, and I'll go back to the UNC, I mean, you have a national executive right now without a Tobago coordinator. There's no Tobago coordinator in the UNC. And you want to speak about national development stuff. So when you see persons, as I said, these MPs coming forward to say, we want to take the organization forward, we want to do something better. We have offered the country this political product for the past 10 years and it has not worked. Let us shift the direction, let the membership has its say. I think that's a very attractive type of conversation and discourse that is happening in the United National Congress. I wish to see it in the PNM. I really do wish to see it in the PNM.
Sorry, Ajay, go ahead.
No, because there are elements of it in the PNM, because there are individuals in the PNM we can identify as strong, good youth leadership with a different perspective. But I think one of the things we tend to underestimate the PNM is the power of their constitution. They hold very, very fast and very rigid their constitution. And it comes across as if no one, inclusive of the political leader, is above the PNM constitution. I mean, sometimes I feel like if their constitution is above the national constitution, the way they treat and they respect the views of their constitution. But as we go back again to youth and youth leadership and youth governance, we also need to realize that some of the elders need to give us the, I don't want to say the foundation, but put systems in place for us and allow us to change some of these principles, because this is 2024. I mean, when you have political organizations that claiming to have public meetings in indoor settings with dark lights and multimedia screens, I mean, even if I don't support your political organization, would I feel compelled to come in to sit into that meeting when it's very close, when it feels very intimate, when the setting of the actual meeting itself is not one open to the general public? How would I feel knowing probably I may not be of your political persuasion, but I want to come to your meeting to listen to your perspective, and just the way your meeting is structured or is set up, I would feel like, oh, so sometimes we need to think bigger than a base, and we need to appeal to a base alone, because there are active youth voters who would be interested in coming. But if we to teach sustainability among the young people, how would that work for the political organization?
I think young people...
Because if you teach a man to fish, he would fish for a day, but if you teach him the good proper fishing skills, he would not need to come back to you for a fish.
I think young people, and this is just based off of what I've seen, are interested in taking part in the political process when they have the age of 18. You know, my 18th birthday, it's the first time I'm going to vote. I can't wait to dip my finger in the ring. I don't know what's the excitement, but young people look forward to it, and then that's it. After that, that's it. There's no interest in long-term thinking. There's no interest in even keeping abreast with what's happening in TNT, because I'm going to dip my finger in the ink today. That's it. Until the next election, I'll see if I vote. I don't know.
I've listened to the Shadow Minister of Education, again, Anita Haynes Allen, and she has been driving a conversation.
You seem to be a very big fan of her.
But because the politics is attractive. She has been, and I'll tell you why, she has been driving a conversation about getting younger persons more interested in politics, and one of the areas in which she spoke about would have been in the education sector. And we can all agree that in our, the way that our education system is set up in this country, I think that beyond knowing who the president, the prime minister, and the major dates are in our country, we ought to know more. We ought to know what is a political party from a very young age, Keaton. maybe in primary school we ought to know what.
You know what's so interesting? I don't think the social studies curriculum actually covers that.
No, and so we are a bit ignorant to the process because we just don't know.
I want to jump in here again.
I saw Ajay getting very excited just now when you were making that point.
Yeah, because I am currently working on a program along with Presiding Officer Abby Taylor, where we are now rolling out a program called Primary Plenary.
Correct.
And what we have realized, we have taught almost all of the primary schools on the island of Tobago, and just simply introducing to them what is assembly legislature, what we do at assembly legislature. And what we found out, interestingly enough, is some of the teachers themselves do not know what we do at assembly legislature. They don't know who is the minority leader, who is the presiding officer. A lot of them have never interacted with the Tobago House of Assembly Act. And then when we see these things happening, those of us who are actively involved, we are like, but at the age of 7, I began following politics. My first understanding of politics is driving around in the small 120Y with 2 speakers on top. And me being an inquisitive young man, keep asking my mother what we doing driving about in them vehicles. You see, at the younger age now, when we interact with them and we show them what the principles are and the inter-debate. I mean, I saw a young man who could easily take over from Chief Secretary Augustine at Standard 5. So and this is what I asked earlier, is it a problem when we have proper political education? Because even doing this process, and we're now heading into phase 2 of the process, which is actually a debate on June 6th. And you can see where these young people, they're already willing, once they get the correct information, once they are taught the principles, and this is without any political influences and apolitical process. And once you give them the correct principles and philosophies, they would understand it. But if the teachers themselves don't know some of this basic information, what's going to happen? I mean, sometimes I'm tempted, if we ask the police officers who are some of the members of parliament, would they be able to tell us?
You said
so
it earlier,
we need to break it down and give them a proper political foundation.
You said it earlier. You said you can give a man a fish, he'll be happy, he'll eat for a day. Teach him how to fish, and he'll never go hungry. You can't force him to fish though. And recently we've been seeing it circulating again. You can draw a horse to the pond, you can't force him to drink. So I agree with what you're saying, fully in principle. I think education is an important thing from young. But once it's continuous, how many people, if you walk out on the streets of TNT right now, could identify who their member of parliament is, who their elected representative is?
I mean, I have a passion for politics and this kind of conversation, and it grew in me from high school debates. I've always wanted to be a part of this sort of discourse, and from a very young age, I would say, he said 7, I can't win there, but maybe the young age of 15 onwards now. So I have about, what, 10 years, 9 years now, and I've had discussions with persons relatively way older than I am, and they don't know these basic things. They don't know the difference between a councillor and MP. They don't know the difference between, they think all MPs are ministers. They believe that the opposition MPs have a say in cabinet. And so those things, I think, create an issue in this country where there's an expectation. There's a number of expectations from some of your MPs or opposition MPs.
Let me jump in a little bit, and some unrealistic expectations.
Unrealistic, yes. Yeah, we are very unrealistic. They think you go to the MP's office and you ask to get assistance with something, and they're able to just wave a wand and get it done, and it doesn't work that way in this country. And so, whilst I understand the question or the plea that has been asked, the reality is that we in this country need to reform the education curriculum to include politics as a part of it. I mean, in the United States, at a very young age, they learn about US history, and so they understand fundamentally the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans.
You've hit a nerve there, because the history that we are taught, is about Christopher Columbus. The history that we are taught about the British Empire, and it is a very fundamental part of who we are as a nation and how we've evolved. But I am disappointed that to the extent that, because you taught Christopher Columbus in primary school, and then when you enter secondary school, you taught Christopher Columbus again. And I'm very disappointed that even though, and I'm not saying to ignore that part of the history, we do not speak to our history as much from 1956 come onwards. We do not speak about our history enough about that. We hear, okay, Eric Williams was the father of the nation. How many people actually know who was the opposition at that time when Eric Williams was actually sitting in Parliament as Prime Minister? Rudranath Kapildeo, people think, what's that? Is that just an auditorium down in Cuba? Or, no, but that's my point. You guys have touched a nerve. It is very frustrating.
I also want to say, what is so wrong in teaching Trinidad and Tobago that UTT was the brainchild of Mr. Patrick Manning? What is so wrong in teaching Trinidad and Tobago that the dollar for dollar program began under Bastille Pandey? What is so wrong in teaching Trinidad and Tobago that the PNM brought on Gate? What is so wrong in teaching Trinidad and Tobago that Bastille Pandey brought the entire roll-on, roll-off industry? So I don't see the issue. We ought to know these things.
Would you like to hear a bit of a joke? When I was in university and I was studying political science, part of it was that we had to go to Parliament. Right? Part of it is that we did a tour of Parliament, we sat down, we had a debate and whatnot. And I mean, you all have experience doing that, being former youth parliamentarians yourselves. But the tour guide at Parliament asked a simple question to a group of individuals who are studying political science. And that is, could you name all of our prime ministers here in Trinidad and Tobago? I heard Eric Williams, I heard Kamla. That's what I heard. I didn't hear Kamla Persabis, I heard Kamla. And I heard Rowley, right? Nobody could speak to the other prime ministers.
Chambers.
Right? Nobody can tell me how George Chambers became prime minister, what led to him becoming prime minister. Nobody can speak to me about who our presidents are, who our presidents were. And I know you may think I'm harping too much now on this point, but as I said, you guys touched a nerve. It is essential that this is a part of our social studies curriculum, not for one term, not for one term, not for one academic year, you know.
But
go ahead, Ajay.
Let me come and be controversial. There's a statement I would always make. Controversial statements provoke critical conversations. So I may say things that may come across to be wrong or rubbed the nose. It's not because it's my position, but usually it creates a correct conversation. I remember doing some research and I found an article which stated that A.N.R. Robinson was a member of the first cabinet of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And he sat there on a PNM ticket. I went on and I did my research on the Parliament website, found the information and so on. And I could tell you the average Tobagonian does not know that. The average PNMite in Tobago who supports the organization does not want to recognize the fact that A.N.R. Robinson sat in the first Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on a PNM ticket. Why? Because it doesn't seem to be politically expedient. We tend to doctor the history that we put out to benefit whichever political organization is needed. Because I would tell persons in the Tobago space, the UNC did a lot of development for Tobago, whether we like it or not. The gas station in Roxborough, the MP gas station in Roxborough, facing the Sidgwick Stadium, was a Jack Warner's initiative. But we always seem to give it that the UNC did nothing in Tobago. The extension of the airport till 2 a.m. created a large number of employment. It created the ease of travel. So, for example, I could have a program in Trinidad, come to Trinidad, get that done during the day. Let's say I'm delayed or some issue happen. I still have the opportunity to catch a 10, 11 or 12 o'clock flight to get back home. Now, at 8, 9 o'clock in the night, if something happens, I have a delay, there's traffic, flooding, whatever it is, I don't have to look to beg and lodging. Who benefits from that? The renaming of the airport was done under the PP administration. The motion was moved by Ashwood Jack at the Tobago House of Assembly. And when it got to cabinet, they actually executed it. What initiative can we say in Trinidad and Tobago that was passed at the Tobago House of Assembly that went on to receive cabinet approval and have been implemented on the island of Tobago? How many Trinidadians know about the Tobago House of Assembly and the Tobago House of Assembly Act? How many of them have read the Tobago House of Assembly Act? How many Trinidadians can name 5 items under the 5th schedule? And then you would hear them saying, Tobago wants too much, but they're fighting for secession. But my question is, how many of them have interacted with these paperwork or have at least read or glimpsed it to be able to speak to the issue?
And I want to agree with him, because the only time that I, as a Trinidadian, became aware of the THA, what it was founded on, what its purpose is, was because of the younger politicians who decided to challenge the status quo in Tobago. And that would have been when Farley, Chavez Augustine, Zorisha Hackett, Dr. Faith B. Israel, Abiti, a number of them. And you were able to understand clearly what the THA is, what is the purpose of the THA, and how this relationship can be with Trinidad and Tobago. And it is what would have been the age group, younger politicians driving a what kind of conversation? A productive conversation.
Indeed. Well, gentlemen, we're actually nearing the end of this conversation this morning, and I actually like the fact that Ajay brought up. How many people actually know that A.N.R. Robinson is a founding member, or was a founding member of the People's National Movement? How many people actually know that, or even knew that he served as Minister of Finance under the first government?
I want to add one more informational nugget to the audience. How many persons know that Mrs. Kamla Prasad Bisasa would have gone up in the seat of Separia in 1991, not under the UNC, but under the NAR, and she would have lost?
Yeah. And I'm glad, gentlemen, that we were able to have this conversation this morning. It's very much not in line with what we planned initially to speak about. But that's the beautiful part about having these conversations and debate. And one thing that you all have touched on is education. I know, how many people know your country? How many people know your country? How many people know Trinidad and Tobago's post-independence history? How many people know about it? Anyway, gentlemen, Ajay, thank you very much for your time, for your presence, and your contribution to the conversation this morning, man. I really appreciate it, as always.
No problem. Thanks for the opportunity.
See you next time. Well, Chris, have a good one. I know this morning was time flies when you're having a constructive conversation. Huh?
Yes. I want to thank you again for having me on, and I also thank Ajay as well. You know, I really enjoy our conversations with Ajay, and I'm looking forward to another one, a follow-up one, because we have a lot of other things to discuss. And I want to tell Trinidad and Tobago that education is important, and it's never too late to learn. And we have technology. You can just Google it.
Exactly. Now you don't. Going to school could be from the comfort of your home. You see this device right here? Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, don't always believe. don't always think that Wikipedia's facts. Just anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much to all my guests for joining me on AM Prime this morning, and thank you very much to the team that always makes it possible. Wishing you a good day ahead, a productive one, a safe one, and we'll see you again very soon. I'm Keaton Shaw. Bye-bye.
WESN.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
The newest book is here, Closer to the Church, the debut novel by author and former mayor Louis Lee Singh, available at all the Home Store branches, Barataria, West Mall, Shogunas and C3 San Fernando. Paper-based bookshop 10 Nook Avenue St. Anne's, WESN 30A Gattaca Street Woodbrook, Metropolitan Bookshop Ariapita Avenue Woodbrook, and all RIK bookstores nationwide. Available online as paperback on Amazon.com and Kindle for e-readers. For more info, call 628-5835 or 389-6504. Also available from author Louis Lee Singh, I Used to Live in Heaven, Letters to My Granddaughters, and Local Government in Trinidad, Conspiracy Against the People.
To all the countries that participated in this joint call, and we urge other world leaders to unite in this demand.
18 countries, including allies of the Israeli state like the UK or Argentina, but also countries like Serbia, Spain and Brazil, issued a joint statement Thursday demanding the release of the hostages in exchange for a prolonged ceasefire in Gaza. All of them have citizens taken hostage by Hamas. The families continue to insist that the hostage case become an international humanitarian crisis.
It's the time not just to make statements, it's time not just to say words, it's time to make actions and to understand that we are dealing with a radical terror organization that only wants to destroy us. And it's time for the world to wake up and do everything that is power to bring those people back.
Hamas officials have so far rejected the international community's deal, but families and friends continue to stage protests outside the Israeli war cabinet, putting pressure on the government, whilst worshippers in Jerusalem have dedicated their collective prayers at the city's western wall to the Israeli hostages.
One of the impacts of the October 7th attack in Israel has been a new sense of urgency for survival and procreation. Demographers are already predicting a post-war baby boom, in part thanks to modern technology used in Israel's fertility sector. As France 24's Catherine Norris-Trent and Claire Duhamel report, some families are even seeking to use sperm retrieved from fallen soldiers and other loved ones.
This is our son. As you see, he was always smiling, always with his smile.
Omri Ram was 28 years old when he was murdered trying to flee Israel's Nova Music Festival on October the 7th. His parents are still in mourning for their surf-loving son, but they've also found a glimmer of hope.
What we have in mind is someday to have a granddaughter, to take her to surf on his surfboard at the ocean, and we believe that we will be able to do that someday. Yeah.
Menashe and Merav Ram hope to let their son's legacy live on by using his sperm, extracted in the hours after his body was recovered.
אני חושבת שבגלל שעומרי מאוד אהב ילדים ומאוד רצה משפחה, הוא היה ילד מאוד מאוד משפחתי, זה היה ברור לי שהוא היה רוצה ילדים והיה רוצה המשכיות.
זה משהו שהוא מאוד עמוק אצל כל יהודי. אחרי שעברנו את השואה, הרצון לא להיכחד ולהמשיך את החיים.
וזה שיש לנו את האפשרות להמשיך ולגדול ולהתחזק ולהביא ילדים מאלה שאינם, זה ניצחון גם לנו כמדינת ישראל וגם לנו כמשפחה וגם לאלה שאינם פה, גם בשבילם.
Posthumous sperm retrieval became legal in Israel in 2003, but was extremely rare. While major legal and ethical questions remain, leading medics in the field tell us demand has soared since October the 7th.
Since the war started, it gave a huge wind for the whole process. The army started to let the families know about the option. So quite a lot of soldiers that died, we do the sperm retrieval upon the request. Israel is a leading country in the whole issue of IVF and reproduction. So doing it after death, I think this is another step in the process.
Overall, Israel is a fertility powerhouse. It's a huge sector here. Israel performs the most IVF treatments in the world per capita, more than 50,000 a year. The government funds limitless cycles for some women up to age 45, and it's permitted with imported donor eggs up to age 57. Egg freezing is very common.
The pressure from the public is very, very serious because people, and especially women, want to have families. In Israel, the social laws are more flexible, and because of the public demand, the authorities, the government help them to have at least 2 children. We help them to do whatever we can.
Demographics have long been an existential question in Israel, which has the highest birth rate of any developed country in the world. More than 3 children per woman, over 6 in Orthodox Jewish communities. And with many people in Israel currently feeling under threat, continuity and survival are again coming to the fore.
That report from Catherine Norris-Trent and Claire Duhamel. Turning now to Beijing, where U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is wrapping up a visit aimed at easing tension. Just a short while ago, he met with Xi Jinping, the Chinese president reportedly telling him the 2 sides should be partners rather than rivals. Earlier this Friday, Blinken also held what he called extensive and constructive talks with his counterpart, Wang Yi. Blinken said he raised concerns with China about support for Russia in the war in Ukraine. Here's Antony Blinken.
In my discussions today, I reiterated our serious concern about the PRC providing components that are powering Russia's brutal war of aggression against Ukraine. China is the top supplier of machine tools, microelectronics, nitrocellulose, which is critical to making munitions and rocket propellants, and other dual-use items that Moscow is using to ramp up its defense industrial base. A defense industrial